Okay, let's get this out of the way. I'm not gonna do what you all think I'm gonna do, which is try to tell you that Fantastic Four, or Tranktastic 4 as I like to call it, was somehow secretly brilliant. No, I haven't cracked some sort of code. I don't have a special fifth dimensional interpretation of the movie to share with you. And I'm really not trying to make some sort of hot take just for the hell of it. I'm just sharing my opinion and saying basically what I've been saying since 2015. It's not a great movie, but it has its merits and, well, I enjoyed it, so let's get to it. Released in 2015 and directed by the formerly up-and-coming Josh Trank, Tranktastic 4 was 20th Century Fox's attempt to reboot the film franchise, bring Marvel's first family back to the big screen, and of course make lots and lots of money. Unfortunately, that's not really how it turned out. The film was a huge flop, reportedly losing the studio over $80 million. It was also torn apart by critics and audiences. In fact, even the director disowned the film before its release. It has since gone down as one of the most notorious flops in recent memory, and Josh Trank's career never really recovered. But like I said, this isn't some revisionist attempt to claim that Tranktastic 4 was great. In fact, even calling it very good might be a bit generous. The sad fact is, the movie had too many flaws to overlook. There was some very awkward, clunky dialogue. Some of the key relationships were sorely underdeveloped. Ben and Johnny, portrayed by Jamie Bell and Michael B. Jordan respectively, barely interact throughout the whole movie. So when Johnny finally does tease Ben at the end of the movie, it doesn't feel like two friends messing with each other. It actually feels quite jarring and off-putting. The villain Doom, played by Toby Kebbell, has powers that are never really explained, and the less said about the last act, the better. The finale somehow manages to make an end-of-the-world scenario feel like there's nothing at stake. Of course, by this point, anyone with an internet connection is completely aware of the film's many flaws. They've been discussed ad nauseum everywhere else, but seeing the internet banned against something always feels a bit odd. It really seemed that most people made up their minds to hate the movie before they even saw it, if they even watched it at all. At one point the movie became a punching bag. It was almost a national pastime to hate the movie. The reviews and online chatter seemed almost too happy to destroy it before it even hit theaters. Eventually its complete failure, critically and commercially, seemed like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But did the movie really deserve all that hate? Things start out well enough when we meet Ben and Reed as kids. The scene, which has a very Spielberg-like vibe, does a great job establishing their connection. They're both outsiders and gravitate towards each other. In a bold move, the movie links Ben's famous catchphrase, "It's clobbering time," to a childhood trauma. It's what his brother used to yell before beating him up. Whether or not that was a good idea is up for debate, but as far as I know, at least it was original. From there, things move to high school, where we find Ben and Reed, now played by Miles Teller, at the science fair. Although Reed's experiment, which transports matter, got him disqualified, it did get the attention of Dr. Franklin Storm, played by Reggie Cathy, who runs a think tank trying to crack interdimensional travel. Dr. Storm believes Reed could be vital to completing their project and recruits him to join the team. He also shows Reed where his invention was really sending objects. He thought it was transporting matter to other parts of the world. In reality, it was being sent to a whole different planet. He also meets Dr. Storm's children, Sue and Johnny, along with the brilliant but hard to get along with Victor Von Doom. They're working on a version of the Quantum Gate, and Dr. Storm hopes that with Reed, they'll finally be able to finish it. And he was right. Unfortunately, as soon as they do, the feds want to take over their project. But on one drunken night, Reed and Victor decide they won't hand over control of their invention. They enlist Ben, and together they head off to what they call Planet Zero. Their interdimensional trip is easily one of the highlights of the movie. It's a very thrilling sequence that was not only excellently executed, but it captures the Cronenberg body horrors vibe that Trank was going for. There's a real sense of danger and suspense. But more importantly, it's genuinely exciting, and although they do manage to make it back home, they're hardly safe. The fun side of superpowers has been explored so many times that it's practically a staple of the genre, but here we see things from a different side. Receiving their powers is instead portrayed as a horrific and traumatizing event that has an unexpected psychological depth that is often overlooked in superhero films. And the Cronenberg influence is clearly evident. Instead of being overcome by joy from their newfound powers, the four of them are filled with panic and desperation. Reed wakes up on an operating table, limbs stretched beyond recognition. He's filled with shock and confusion. Johnny lies on the table writhing as his body is burning. Sue, unable to control her abilities, is visibly overcome by fear. But nothing is as powerful as hearing Ben's panic turn to fear as he realizes that he isn't trapped under a pile of rocks. He is a pile of rocks. From here, it's very interesting to see how differently they react to their powers. Sue, the most underused in the movie, seems relatively fine with the situation. She's angry but not overwhelmed like the others. Johnny is the one who comes closest to seeing the bright side of the situation. At some points, it actually seems like he might be excited to have powers. He's more than willing to train and essentially become a weapon for the army. Reed is understandably the most overwhelmed with guilt. He goes into exile until he can find a way to cure his friends. But Ben is easily the most interesting and moving one. Having become a walking pile of rocks, it's understandable that he'd be the one to suffer an emotional breakdown. He's heartbroken and devoid of hope. And Jamie Bell is absolutely captivating, and he conveys the hopelessness of the character even without a lot of dialogue. When he does speak, his words are filled with anguish and despair. When he begs Reed not to leave, it's powerful and moving. So when he agrees to become the army's weapon, it's not particularly surprising, but heartbreaking all the same. He's at an emotional low point, and with Reed gone, he's easily manipulated. The only real shame is that he deserves more screen time, and the trailer suggests that there's at least some unused footage of him. Unfortunately, this is where the seams of the reshoots start to show. The movie skips ahead a year and it becomes clear that it has taken a turn for the worse. There's a debriefing scene that is off-putting and awkward. It seems like something was cut out and they needed clumsy exposition to fill in the audience. From here, the movie begins to come off the rails and only briefly recovers when Vic is brought back from Planet Zero. Once he's back in the military compound, Vic, now calling himself Doom, goes on a gruesome killing spree that is perfectly executed. It's thrilling, and the Cronenberg influence is clearly on display once again. But it's not long before his evil scheme is introduced, and all hope of the movie going out on a high note is extinguished. In the final act, character development is completely ditched, and the actors have visibly thrown in the towel as the movie crawls to what can arguably be called a climax. The worst part is that the ending feels so tacked on and disconnected from what came before that it almost feels like a completely different movie. In the end, it's hard to judge this movie without thinking about the better movie that lies beneath the surface. The backstage drama has been well documented. How much of it is true is anyone's guess, but it's hard to ignore the fact that it almost feels like two different movies stitched together. It also can't be a coincidence that the best executed and most effective parts of the movie are the ones that stray from the more traditional take on the superhero genre. The movie really falls apart when it clumsily tries to force itself into a superhero movie mold. It's also here where the tone shifts abruptly and feels like the product of the much publicized reshoots. This lends itself to the idea that Josh Trank's vision didn't fully make it to the screen. But unfortunately, there is no way to judge a movie that never came out. All we have to go on is the final product. It's just unfortunate that Tranktastic 4 got swallowed up by the pre-release bad buzz that created a narrative that stopped people from ever giving it a fair chance. I still remember how obsessed people were with the backstage drama, gleefully sharing every bit of bad press as if they were going to personally profit for the movie's failure. It felt like everyone decided that the movie was awful before it even came out. I actually know people who never saw the film and for some reason decided that it was some sort of crime against cinema. But that's hardly exclusive to Tranktastic 4. In fact, we see it all the time. Perhaps most recently with Don't Worry Darling. A lot of times the internet can feel like an echo chamber, amplifying ideas or opinions so loudly that a lot of people accept them as facts. And it promotes mob mentality and people maniacally attack films they haven't even seen. I don't think it's just audiences either. A lot of times it feels like critics are just going along with the consensus. I think that a more objective assessment of Tranktastic 4 would note that even though it is flawed and lacking the action, fans have come to expect from a superhero movie, it still has redeeming qualities. The tone and pacing are great, at least for the first 3/4 of the film. The cast is generally strong and has great chemistry, although I think Jamie Bell is a standout. He's amazing as a Thing and perfectly conveys the terror and confusion he feels when he realizes what happened to him. Miles Teller is great as a well-intentioned but sometimes clueless genius. The scene where he meets Johnny for the first time generally puts a smile on my face every time. And he also captures the guilt that Reed feels so well. Michael B. Jordan is amazing. Kate Mara is a little bit underused, but she does it best with what she's giving. I even like Toby Cabell as Victor/Doom. Unfortunately, it doesn't really come together in the end, but to me that feels like the result of studio interference. It's definitely a very disappointing climax, but it's not horrible, and I think the foundation was solid enough to build on. I would have gladly watched a whole trilogy with this cast and take of the characters, and I don't think I'm the only one. And if anything, I think it's a strong case for studios to let directors just do their jobs.